So thank you so much, as always, for giving up your time. Today we have, as always, another action-packed and very full agenda. And so I won't spend a long time doing an introduction, but just to say that you will recall that in our agenda, of which we published some time ago now and then refreshed, we called for a minimum digital living standard for Wales, and as a network and as an alliance. And we saw that as being a really important, it was one of our 5 priority areas. And it's been very pleasing, therefore, that call was answered by colleagues in Welsh Government and others, and work was commissioned to develop a minimal digital living standard, initially for families with children or households with children. And so it is great to have an opportunity to hear the outcome of that. And we're going to have a presentation, therefore, from the research team, of whom there are a number on the call, to take us through what the learning is, what potential next steps might be as well. And we're also going to be joined by Ruth, who's the head of Financial and Digital Inclusion branch in Welsh Government. That's the part of Welsh Government sitting in what was Jane Hutt's area, who funded the work that was done in Wales. And Alliance members, a big thank you to those of you who supported this work and helped with some of the recruitment of families, households with children. So essentially the meeting is devoted to that. We're going to have some breakout because we're very clear that having a minimum digital living standard is great, but we have to use it. So we're really keen to spend some of the time in this meeting talking to network members about how we can start actually using it in practice now that we have it. But we're going to start by hearing what it is and what's been done. So I'm going to hand over now, if I may, to Emma Stone. Emma, a member of the Alliance from Good Things Foundation, a key partner to Digital Communities Wales and Compass, and also Professor Simeon Yates, a colleague from Liverpool University, who are going to tell us about the findings and the work. So thanks very much indeed.
So Emma, am I sharing slides or are you sharing slides?
So I'm happy to share the slides, Sim. So I will get those loaded up if you want to then start talking.
Right, okay. So thank you everybody for being here. Some of you may have seen this before because we have done an event in Wales and we have done a number of other events at various other networks. So for those who have seen it before, I hope you enjoy watching it again. And for those who haven't, we hope this will be quite informative. We're going to rattle through this today to fit in with the agenda. There's quite a lot of information. And obviously there's breakout sessions afterwards, and other colleagues from the project from Loughborough and so on are on the call as well. So in the breakout rooms, you'll have an opportunity to speak to them. I'm not sure how we're handling questions, but please do put some in the chat.
We have a 10-minute slot after you finish presenting, or after Ruth, in fact, to take questions.
Yeah, but just to say, if you have got questions that don't get answered or whatever, please put them in the chat and we'll try and answer them after the session. Right, so minimum digital living standards. As Hamish has said, this was something that the Welsh Government called for. Part of that kind of calling for it came from the fact that we as a team with others such as the Carnegie Trust at the time were also calling for this. And so between the funding we got nationally from Nuffield, the support from the Welsh Government, and also along the way we got some support from Nominet. Nominet owned the .uk bit of email of web addresses, but are a non-profit and reinvest in research and other activities. We've done this big national project on minimum digital living standards, as part of which was a focus on some of the specificities and needs in Wales and a proper sense check that this works for the kind of Welsh nation. It's a big project, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to read everyone's names out, but you can see from there, University of Liverpool, Loughborough University, who are core to the central methodology of this, Good Things Foundation, this was sort of Emma's idea to start with, City, UCD, Swansea, Hamish, Compass, have all been part and parcel of these projects, and critical, which are on there, are our, sort of high quality national survey partner. So everything that's said here that's good is them. Anything daft that's said is me. Why are we doing it? We felt, Emma and I discussing, and men with other colleagues and many of the people in the room, etc., that we talk to on a regular basis, have really pointed out the limitations of measures of digital inequalities and digital exclusion that simply focus on tech. Have you got broadband? Have you got a laptop? Whatever. And don't take into account the skills needed and the context that household and families and people are actually in. So Emma had the idea of bringing in the Loughborough colleagues who've got a methodology for talking to households, deliberately talking through households through a well-structured, repeated research process to come up with benchmarks. In their case, they normally look at income standards and needs. So we reapplied that to digital needs. And they've done all the field work to build up the definitions through that iterative process, which we'll talk about in a moment. But what we wanted it to be there for is bottom up, what the public, what households say they need, not what experts or government advisors or policymakers say people need, what people say they need to just be okay digitally included. We don't mean gold-plated laptops and gold-plated iPhones. What we mean is enough so that you don't start to suffer disadvantage for your kids' education or your access to services or your social engagement, or you're at greater online risk. That's the idea. It's not food bank minimum, because a food bank is not an adequate standard of living, right? But it's not a wish list, right? So it's bottom up from the public, that it could be used as a benchmark, whether you're talking to an individual household or doing some survey work, that it's holistic, it covers skills and equipment and needs in combination. It's a starting point. It's not supposed to be perfect for every household. If a household has a child with a disability, or their first language isn't English, or they're in a specifically challenging rural community or urban area, the needs might be slightly different, but it's a starting point for that discussion. Make sure it was evidence-based, both the high quality qualitative work, both the deliberative discussion with households, and as I'll mention in a moment, the follow-up work with households and stakeholders, especially in Wales, to provide a clear kind of understanding base for it, but also some survey work, so we've got the hard numbers. It was funded by Nuffield as a proof of concept. I think we proved the concept, and I think we can say that Nuffield is now going to support us through to doing all the other household types, because we focused on households with kids at the moment. And just a little nice moment for Wales. The Scottish government saw Wales had got one of these, and now the Scottish government want one of these. So we will be effectively replicating aspects of the work we've done in Wales in Scotland, so that the Scottish government can also follow Wales as example and make use of this in their digital policy. So, Wales has been really important in driving forward the idea of this and the usefulness of this in policy. So next slide, Emma. So the methodology, the first stage involves the deliberative work that colleagues at Loughborough have done. We start off with a first stage to define what a minimum digital living standards means in terms of kind of a verbal definition. And then 3 rounds of repeated working with groups representing households, in this case, initially households with children, because that's what we had funding for, who provide a list of goods and services and skills and needs, which we then take to a second set of groups, and this is what the Loughborough team did, which they check and refine and revise, and then to a final set of groups to give us the overall definition. That was the first stage of the project, to give us the list, as it were. We then took that list, did a pilot survey with 200 households with everything on the list, which is actually quite a huge amount of work, so that we could look at it statistically and identify how we could measure it in a more robust but more compressed way in a big national survey. We did that. We did a national survey of over 1,500 households, over 4,500 people in those households, and then did some stats analysis to look at who is above and below the MDLS for households with children. We then took that, again, that was the whole team, but especially Loughborough and Good Things, to stakeholders, particularly in Wales, as part of the Welsh work, but also nationally, to see what they thought of the MDLS, how they would be able to use it. And maybe people on the call were really helpful parts of that work. And within Wales, we also did, the Loughborough team did some interviews with households who are below the MDLS and their specific needs in their specific context, to look at how you might use it to understand the barriers to meeting the MDLS. Next slide, please. And this basic slide describes the Welsh work. I won't go, I've described a good bit of it already. So we talked to stakeholders. We did additional groups with households in various parts of Wales to make sure that definition works for the Welsh context, interviewed families below the MDLS, and did further stakeholder interviews. And importantly, you know, things that came out in the Welsh context, concerns about affordability, aspects of rurality, the importance of the Welsh language in the provision of services and digital opportunities online, the diversity of the types of communities and individuals that we were engaging with. And as with the national stuff, digital risks, harms, digital safety for children was a big concern. And questions about where adults, and, you know, in this case, because they've got kids, parents can get more information on developing those digital skills they were lacking, which of course is a national issue, but, you know, again, there's different approaches in Wales than maybe in other parts of the country. So here it is. So that first stage, that definition stage, at the start, developed this statement. This was developed by households, not by us, which is that a minimum digital standard of living includes, but is more than, having accessible internet, adequate equipment, and the skills, knowledge, and support people need. It's about being able to communicate, connect, and engage with opportunities safely and with confidence. And I have to say, from my point of view, the more we've gone on to talking to people about the MDLS, the more we've analysed the data, that bit at the end about you know, engaging with opportunities safely and with confidence is really, really the important bit that makes it an adequate, you know, standard of living, that you can be online safely and be confident you can achieve the tasks you want to achieve. We had 3 layers to this. I think that may be no, sorry, Emma, go back one slide. Sorry, can you go back one slide? Anyway, there's 3 layers to the MDLS. We're rushing forward. Oh, there we go. There we go. There's 3 layers. There's the kit. There's the skills to use that kit, and then there's the critical awareness, the safety skills on top of that, and we'll go through those in a moment. But that's why it's holistic. It covers all 3 layers. Sorry, Emma. And so the big reveal, from the survey, we find that 45% of households with kids are below the minimum digital living standard defined by households with kids. And I do know occasionally we get some pushback. People say that's a really high number. But let's remind ourselves that 40% of single parent households are in poverty, that 20% of households with kids are in poverty. I'm not getting the exact figures here. And about 40% of households with kids don't meet the minimum income standard that the Loughborough colleagues measure. So, and we know from some of our other prior research about digital skills that a very large proportion of the population, again around 40%, are low digital users or have low digital skills. So you bundle all of that together, we could have probably guessed that figure to start with, but that is the stark reality that 3.7 million households in the UK are falling short on kit, functional or critical skills. But what it does emphasize is the importance of digital for family life, then the role of poverty in defining many of these issues. Here's the list of goods and services. I won't go through the list. If you have a look at it, it's all about absolute minimum, a basic laptop, a basic smartphone, a good enough but not super fancy internet, and so on. There are some things on there that people push back on. like access to online gaming. But when we were talking to young people, the importance of having the ability to interact with your friends online, whether it's through gaming or other activities, is core to who they are. Taking it away is an aspect of inequality and exclusion for them. About 80% of households meet that list. But when we go on to skills, to the next slide, Emma, sorry, I'm trying to rattle through here. When we go into like functional skills, again, 80% of households have those skills, but we're still seeing 20% of households not having these very basic functional skills. We're not talking AI, data analytics skills. We're talking, turning on and off devices, using apps and so on appropriately, etc. And importantly, there's skills in there that are not in some of the government type lists, like the essential digital skills lists. Things like making sure you can manage your phone data over the month so as not to run out. Again, we're talking about the skills needed to meet a minimum digital life. And some of those skills are really quite important if you don't have an abundance of kit or an abundance of data or an abundance of internet access and so on. So there's quite a bit in there that's about good enough, to be digitally included, which requires additional skills than other, when you're like my household with multiple mobile devices and very high speed broadband. So next slide, please, Emma. When we come on to the critical skills, so these are the safety skills. This is where a lot of households fall down, where both parents and school kids are deemed not to be confident about their ability to deal with things like, again, basic stuff, evaluating friend requests, managing the pressures of being online, checking information, being able to report offensive or inappropriate things. And in amongst the skills, there are things like connecting with the school and so on, where we still have, like 15%, 40% of whatever households not being confident about using their digital skills to interact with the school. This is households with kids. So again, it's not a long list. It's not a list of really high level skills, but just enough to be safe online and to be aware of how online world works. Combining all those together, we end up with the 45% of households fall down either on equipment, on skills, functional skills, on critical skills, or a combination of all three. And I think this is where I hand over to Emma. This is where I hand over to you, Emma.
Yeah, I'm happy to take it from here.
Yeah.
So just kind of, I suppose, drawing out some of the additional things that came through the stakeholder engagement and the interviews with families. And a lot of that was focused in Wales, but is relevant to the whole of the UK. It's really clear, this message about it being essential for family life in terms of especially bigger implications for family already facing challenges. And also, though, a sense that this is a benchmark. It's not trying to cover all of the different circumstances and characteristics of different families. So it's very much recognizing that this is a kind of a baseline, but some families may need extra or different ways to meet that overarching definition of being able to engage with opportunities safely and with confidence. In terms of affordability, that was raised in a lot of the Wales interviews as a key barrier. And through the interviews with families, I know Loughborough colleagues were hearing examples of where families were finding ways to meet their digital needs, but at what cost? And so there's this overarching thing of actually, that's not right. That's not the sort of society we want to live in either, where people are attaining a minimum digital living standard, but doing so because they're maybe having to take out loans or use credit or needing to share devices to a level that is greater than what members of the public had said, kind of, this is what you need as a family today. And social tariffs did come up, and you won't be surprised, anyone in this virtual room, around low awareness, but also a question that they're insufficient for families' needs. And thinking about it, a lot of social tariffs haven't been developed with that sense of this being for a household or for a family, So I think there's been real value here in actually just that household and holistic approach to the minimum digital living standard. I suppose just a bit of a reflection, this might come out in the breakouts as well. Obviously, at the moment, there's a lot of discussion around safety, and I'm just going to fast forward a little bit. Now, I'll come back to that. It's just one reflection that there's a lot of movement now about, should smartphones be banned in schools? Should smartphones and apps not be used below a certain age? And what I think the minimum digital living standards, obviously this work was done, the fieldwork was done before those conversations were happening. But in a way, this point about it being essential for family life is a reflection on where families feel they are now. Now, that's not saying this is about societal norms and family life now. It's not saying that is a society that people are happy with, that these are norms people feel comfortable with. So I just think it's really helpful in terms of thinking about these findings in the context of current debates as well. So maybe that's something we could pick up later. Where you live can make a big difference, but do ask for a bit more information later from Simeon about where rurality is and isn't showing up in relation to families and their minimum digital living standard. But a key finding that really came through the survey results and then the statistical modelling that Simeon and his colleagues took forward was about the really clear way in which poverty and related characteristics are a driver where families are below the minimum digital living standard. So one of the other benefits of the survey was that postcode data was provided with consent by many of the households taking part, which then enabled some additional analysis and the production of a series of maps that you can look at in terms of the likelihood of households with children being below the minimum digital living standard. And I am going to pause here and ask Simeon to speak to this slide.
Okay. So what we were able to do was work with the geography colleagues in University of Liverpool, who build what are called geodemographics. So essentially, like a persona profile for very small areas of the country, at about the postcode or other lower super output levels that people may know about. And what we found was that the likelihood of meeting the MDLS matched very closely to one of the standard geodemographics based on the census. And importantly, that we had data on all the different types of that geodemographic, except the ones we would expect to not have, which are areas that don't have families with kids. So that the match was very strong. So we were able to use that to look at what was the probabilities for different types of geodemographics meeting the MDLS or not. That's the interactive map. There's a picture there of the interactive map you can look at. What's really important to remember is that this is households with children only. It is not all household types in an area. So you may find an area that looks like it's okay for digital inclusion, but that's the inclusion of households with children in that area. There may, for instance, be a lot of social housing with older people in that area, and you might know that they're digitally excluded, but we're not measuring that population at the moment, etc. What it does tend to show nationally is that the areas of worst sort of exclusion for households with kids are poor urban areas rather than necessarily poorer rural areas. But I think that also goes to the point Emma made earlier, and that Catherine at Loughborough has talked about very clearly, that is evidence of households meeting that standard, but doing so at what cost? Paying extra costs for broadband because they have limited, competitive opportunities to buy different services because of where they are, or being very dependent on having good quality broadband at home to compensate for poor quality mobile so that they can download things and be, etc. Yet they are taking up, and we have shown that others have shown this, Promising Trouble and others have shown this, that for poorer households, taking up a much larger proportion of their income to meet those needs. So we're not denying that rurality is an issue. I think what is an interesting question is how it plays out differently for households with kids in different parts of the country and the challenge of meeting the MDLS. But for those households that are not meeting the MDLS, the geographic mapping shows that poor urban areas are quite notably the worst areas in the country.
Brilliant. So in terms of then moving specifically into implementing a minimum digital living standard for Wales, this will be familiar to many of you in terms of Welsh Government and Digital Inclusion Alliance Wales members seeing this as a priority. We know Welsh Government is using the standard to inform the next national survey for Wales, and I know Ruth is going to say more about plans for minimum digital living standard for Wales shortly. And it really links to this being, it is a research piece, but the idea has always been for it to be really useful and useful in different ways. And these are some of the examples of where it's being used not only kind of at a government level, but really importantly, think about local authorities and health boards and voluntary sector organisations and other service providers and telecoms companies are engaging with this as well, to use this research to inform strategies, interventions, service provision, and there could be really interesting ways in which this could, for example, be used in as part of social value in public sector procurement, as well as setting clearer standards. And a couple of weeks ago, some of you might have been in Cardiff. We had an in-person event, and that identified a number of different ideas for how the standard could be useful and used by different stakeholders separately, but really importantly, also together. And there was a key message there about how it can be helpful in setting that shared language and a standard for Wales public services, and how that could be built into other legislation and goals, for example, future generations and well-being. But also there were a lot of stakeholders in the room that were coming from very different perspectives. So some who were working more around, say, adult skills or people with learning disabilities or social care. And already in the discussions, people were using MDLS, I suppose, to think more deeply about what's their role, about the impacts for people using their services who might fall below this, and about how the standard might also be helpful in things like equality impact assessments or commissioning guidance. And it was also really generating discussion around who has a role to play, and that it's not only those of us that have a focus on digital inclusion. How can we use this research and the contents for households to get others from public and voluntary sector bodies involved and seeing this as part of their role too. We know there are some examples already about how it's being used by employers to identify and support staff below the standard in order to kind of, make a commitment that every member of staff should at least be at this standard. And there were also some real kind of great ideas for organisations like Good Things and Compass, and for Digital Communities Wales and Welsh Gov, in terms of how can we, promote this? Is there a convening role here? How can we create a simple shared evaluation framework for pilots? Think about where this marries up with other skills frameworks, encourage others to sign up, and through all of this, recognising some big barriers around funding, no surprise, and also securing senior buy-in. So that's just a flavour of what came out of those events. There's lots more information, but I'm going to stop sharing now because I know that in part main focus for today is how we can build on the ideas that came out of those of that event a few weeks back to think about using MDLS and implementing it in Wales.
Emma, Simeon, thank you very much indeed. That's excellent, and it's such a brilliant piece of work. There is going to be a little bit of a chance to ask questions of Emma, Simeon, and colleagues in a moment, but we're going to hear now from Ruth Bacigalupo from Welsh Government on their perspectives of this. And the work they're going to do in social housing. So, Ruth.
Thanks very much, Hamish. Thanks, Emma and Simeon, for that really comprehensive introduction, and for also mentioning the event, which I thought was fantastic. And it was really nice to be able to actually see people in person, sometimes for the first time for quite a few years. So yeah, it was really, really good, really positive. So let me try and share my screen. Here we go, share, see if that works.
Yeah.
Great, okay. Just put that on. There we go. Perfect. So hi everyone. This is my first time at this meeting, so you might not know who I am, but my name's Ruth. I head up the Financial and Digital Inclusion branch, and I've worked in the branch since December 2022. And my mission really has been to join up the two bits, if you like, of that branch. Originally, there were two separate teams that came together. And I think the big message that I've taken from lots of stakeholders, but also learnt myself, is the absolute cross-cutting nature of digital and financial inclusion. So when we're thinking about the minimum digital living standard, it's also really appropriate to financial inclusion too, and that's becoming more and more apparent. I also wanted to say you're probably more familiar with my colleagues Lisa Thomas and Stephen Thomas. Stephen has actually secured another role in Welsh Government. He works in the health department now on digital inclusion and digital inclusion projects. So I'd like to thank him for all his work. I know he's not here, but he's been a real driver for this MDLS work from the very start. And I'm hoping that to recruit to his role shortly. So you will have somebody different as well coming to these meetings. So it could be Lisa, me, and somebody different. So I'll keep you updated on that. So let me just move on the next slide. So I thought it'd be useful to set the kind of political context, because that has changed, as Hamish alluded to. So we now have a new minister, or cabinet secretary as they're called. So our digital inclusion lead would be Lesley Griffiths, who's the cabinet secretary for culture and social justice. And the overall digital strategy is led by Jeremy Miles, who's Cabinet Secretary for Economy, Energy and Welsh Language. The digital strategy itself, as an overarching strategy, is a programme for government commitment, so very high priority for Welsh Government. And as part of that strategy, there are 6 missions, 6 priority areas, if you will, and digital inclusion is the second of those. And the actual overarching aim for digital inclusion is very much about the skills and confidence piece. So I've written it down there, I won't say it out loud. And I think what's been great about MDLS is that it's taken this holistic approach. So it's added in the things like, internet access, device access, and other aspects of that that we didn't actually have in our digital inclusion definition. So it's really added a lot of value.
Ruth, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you've got other slides and we're only seeing your title slide at the moment.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to move. Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so that's the slide I've just talked to. I haven't got many slides, and they're not very, they're just words. So I will share them afterwards because there's information in there that you may find useful. So let me go to the next one, the next slide, which talks about what we've done so far, which was the excellent work that we've done with Simeon, Emma, all the team who've been fantastic, and Compass in terms of delivering 2 phases of MDLS work in Wales. So phase 1 early last year, was to develop the definition that Simeon showed you, and also to consider what was in the previous presentation. So the types of device, broadband speed, all that kind of thing, and digital skills that people would need in a modern Wales. Phase 2, which was published last November, identifies the key barriers for families with children and third sector organisations working with communities, and highlights potential areas that could inform our cross-government policies, both current and future, which is really important for us. And we are doing something next. So we are pretty strapped for cash at Welsh Government, but we've managed to secure enough capital funding to do a minimum digital living standard pilot on a small scale. So the next phase is actually to test the research. And we decided to do this pilot with social housing associations and social housing residents. And the reason for that was that we wanted to get more intelligence on different types of household types, if you like. So we've done a lot to do with households with children, but we did want to have an opportunity to think about older people, to think about people with additional barriers, for example. And so that's why we decided to target housing associations for this particular pilot. I'm really pleased to say that 2 grants have been awarded to 2 social housing providers for a 9-month pilot to commence in July. I can't tell you who they are yet because we haven't had their letters back saying formally they're going to take this forward. But I'm really keeping my fingers crossed that I can share that information very soon with you. And the idea of the pilot will be that we will do a survey, or social housing associations will do a survey with a sample of their residents at the beginning. We'll then put in a number of interventions around what's required and measure at the end and just be able to see what difference it is that we've made. Emma also mentioned the National Survey for Wales. So that's our primary mechanism for capturing data sets. And there are new statistics due out in July. So very soon we'll have new statistics from the National Survey. Currently, use of the internet is measured by personal use of the internet, which we think is not really, doesn't go into enough detail for us right now. So we're developing a new set of questions to align with MDLS, and they'll be included in next year's national survey. And we hope that'll give us a much more robust measure of digital inclusion in Wales. And then finally, here are all our contact details. And I would just say I'm just really happy for any of you to contact us anytime if you've got any queries or questions, and be really happy to answer them as far as we can. So that's it from me. I'll try and stop sharing now. See if I can work out to do that.
It's at the top of your screen, and it should be a
slideshow. You're quite right. There we go. I work on Teams more than Zoom, so I'm a little bit.
There's a thing at the very top that says "Stop sharing." Right at the very, very top of your screen.
Yes, I've done it. Has it not stopped sharing?
No.
Okay.
There. I know. Yes, now it has. That's
okay.
Good.
Cool.
Lovely. I think. Right. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Ruth. Still something going on there, but not quite sure what. Okay, that's good. So we have just a few minutes now. We can just a few minutes for questions, and then we will go into our breakout groups. So Ruth, perhaps I could start with you, because there's a question in the chat from Scott, which I think is probably targeted at you. Are there any data caps on the internet provided for the people on the pilot or future pilots? I know you said gaming is encouraged, which is brilliant, but gaming uses lots of data. Could be an idea to encourage SD streaming over HD where possible on gaming or watching YouTube, etc.
Yeah, this has been a really controversial one. I think this and the specific size of the television that was specified are the two that have been the most elicited the most debate. So in answer to your question, Scott, no, we don't have that as far as I know, unless Simeon corrects me. I think the thing about having access to gaming is the kind of social contact, and obviously the flip side of that is the bad side of social contact. So I take your idea on board. It could be an idea to encourage streaming wherever possible. Perhaps that's something that we can discuss with the social housing providers when they do their survey and get a little bit more data on that, because I'm not aware that we have specific data on that.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, Simeon, go for it.
I mean, I think there's a couple of things to be aware of. This is a minimum digital living standard that households themselves have defined. So households themselves have said it is important for our children's socialization and the young people that we also, because Nominet paid us to essentially sense check the MDLS with young people, and essentially they came up with the same list, maybe for slightly different reasons, but came up with the same kind of list. So, it's been sense checked by both the parents and the children. It's about to be digitally included in a modern society. Young people and parents note that having access to things like online gaming provides you access to social and cultural content, your friends, it's part of your life. To be excluded from that leads to issues of exclusion at school, bullying. It also, and it's a part and parcel of just being at the moment for a lot of people. What we're not saying is it is the job of the Welsh government, or it is the job of a local authority to provide people with a gaming console. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is a household that lacks access to those devices is likely to have some aspect of social exclusion, right? I think the point, and Emma's made this really clearly before, is the point of the MDLS is for organizations to look at that list and say, which bit of it is it my responsibility to support, or I could support through my, charitable activity, or that would be really important for the people I work with, say in, supporting education or something, that I can find a way to help households meet that. The solution to meeting a gaming console could be that grandparents have bought it as a Christmas present, or whatever. It's not that the state is supposed to provide. The television thing and the specifying the size comes from the minimum income standards, and I'm sure Catherine, people on the call can come in. That's essentially the smallest, cheapest smart TV you can buy these days. I mean, that's the point. I mean, these are all basically the smallest, good functioning basic devices you can. I see Chloe's there as well. Maybe Chloe can jump in, or Catherine. So they're not there saying you must have we're saying if you go out to the market and try and buy a basic smart TV, that's what a basic smart TV is. It's not defining it that, it's got to be that size for some reason. That's just the basics that's out there. So
I'm happy to provide a bit more context. Because obviously this was a pilot study, it was informed by a well-established approach, which is our minimum income standard, and then we obviously reapplied that in a very digitally focused way. Something that comes over from that as a result of that is the way that we talk around the definition of minimum digital inclusion. What is that? And something just to really make the point about is that, yes, groups, when they develop the definition for a start, they do make a distinction between what is the need to have and what is the nice to have. So we definitely do not talk about a wish list. There's definitely a lot of discussion about what is a need and why, and there has to be a very strong rationale there. And so it is a minimum, but it's an acceptable minimum. And also, this is something else we follow through from our minimum income standard work as well, is that when we tend to talk about the definition and needs and so on, it's not a stopgap. It's not this will do for now. We're in a pinch and things are really difficult. This is the bare bones, and it is the need to have. It is the minimum, but it's not the bare bones survival. It's about inclusion, social participation, as well as getting everyday tasks done. And you could be at this level, you could be at that threshold for an indefinite period of time, and it wouldn't cause you any harm as a result. So there's those kinds of things that come through. And I think, yeah, you're right, Sim, about things specifically around the TV. That's a bit of a hangover from minimum income standard when it comes to recommending, specifying rather, certain screen sizes. I think because this was very much a pilot, we were coming from a point of view where for the minimum income standard, we have to price things. And then when we were doing it for the digital living standard at first, we didn't know if we would end up pricing what groups talked about. So we got this very granular detail, and we got these specifications. And I'm not so sure that we would do that going forward. So when we review the households with children, at the same time as looking at all of the households, it might still be, you know, discussions around spec, but maybe not screen size so much and that much sort of granular detail. But it does still stand regardless that is pretty much the option anyway. That would be pretty much entry level. And there might be lots of households who have older TVs in their household, but if you were to go and price that now, so it's related to that activity of going and looking in suppliers now, it would be smart TVs as opposed to unsmart ones that you'd find.
Thank you very much. So we got into that actually really helpful conversation, because it kind of gave us a bit more depth about exactly understanding what this is. We actually got into it for a question that was really about the data and the data involved in streaming and gaming. And I think the answer was no, there is no cap on the data. Is that right?
The definition is enough bandwidth for everybody in the household to be able to use it. We didn't put a number on it.
No, that's in the MDLS. But the question that was being asked by Scott was about the pilot in social housing in Wales, I think. Is that right, Scott? I think so. So the question to Ruth, I think, is in the pilots, is there a cap on data?
No.
Fine. That's great. Thank you very much. But it's been a really helpful conversation, because it's explored some of the kind of the use of this standard. We're going to go into breakout now. So the purpose of this breakout, and I don't know, Caddy, did you, before I launch this, is there anything you wanted to say first?
Hi, yeah, just to quickly come in, firstly say hello, I'm Caddy, I'm one of Sarah's colleagues. Sarah sends her apologies for not being here today, so standing in instead, but we're about to go into breakout rooms. It'll be for 30 minutes. There will be a facilitator in each breakout room. Facilitator will be making notes. Those notes will be anonymized, so please feel free to speak freely, but yeah, you'll be automatically put into a series of breakout rooms, so please bear with us whilst that happens. Thanks.
Just before you do that, then, so just bear in mind this is thinking about how we've got this tool now, we've got this measure, how are we going to use it? It's been a fantastic piece of work to develop it, but we need to think about what are we going to do with it. We asked for it, we've got it, we now need to, as an alliance, to think about what we're going to do, and that's what we want you to think about in the next phase. So thank you, Caddy. Fire away and send us off at the wonders of technology to somewhere else.
Welcome back, everybody. I think we've got, yes, that's everybody back in now. Thank you all so much. Hopefully that was a fruitful conversation. Thank you to the facilitators. I know you'll be sending some notes through to Sarah to look through, which is really great. So as we do in every Alliance Network meeting now, we're going to do a short survey. It's live, and it helps inform the exploring impact reports that Sarah sends out quarterly to you all. So please note that the usual question about what would you like us to focus on in the next Alliance meeting has an extra option this time. That's because we've had a couple of requests to have a focus on the digital switchover in an Alliance meeting, so we've added that as an additional option. So I'm just going to put the poll into the chat. It will also be circulated with the slides, the presentations, and kind of Sarah's roundup as well. So in the chat, there is a link to a Microsoft Forms survey. If you could open that up, we can give everyone, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, if people need to leave, that's okay. We've got the poll, and then Hamish will do a roundup to finish the network meeting. But yes, the poll is in the chat. If you could dedicate a couple of minutes now or later to that, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Excellent.
Over to you then, Hamish.
Lovely. Thanks very, very much to you, Kelly. So it's been another great discussion. So thank you so much to everybody, particularly for the contributions you will have made in the groups, and we're really looking forward to hearing that all brought together as a kind of aggregated report for us. As I say, it's very exciting, as I said at the beginning, it's very exciting to see this coming to fruition, because it is something we called for 18 months ago, perhaps a bit longer. It's been a really good bit of work. We're really grateful to colleagues in Welsh Government for having contributed to the funding of it, and to all the various partners and stakeholders who helped, particularly those families, households with children who took part and provided the information, which of course is really at the heart of it. So thank you, and thank you to Simeon and Emma and colleagues from Loughborough as well, and to Ruth for giving us the Welsh Government perspective and next steps. Obviously, we would like to see, we'll see what the poll says, but I'm sure we would like to see an opportunity to extend this to other types of household. There are many, and it's great to know that at a UK level, at least, that's going to happen now by the sound of it. The network is the strength of the network is in the connections across the network as well, and so please do continue, as I know you already do, to make connections with other people in the network, to see how you can help each other, share advice and support, and please do continue to think about how you can put this into practice in the area that you work in. And as I was saying in our breakout group, you know, if it would be helpful, if you've got a large group of people, or you represent a national organisation, maybe with many separate members, and it would be helpful to have a short presentation about this planned at future. I'm sure that's something we can try and facilitate as well, in order to get this message out to as many people as possible, and actually to clarify some of the potential misunderstandings as well. So I think that will be good. Sarah couldn't be with us today, and Caddy has stepped in and, as I would have expected, done a brilliant job. So thank you very much, Caddy. Really appreciated. Great to have you in control. I'm sure we fixed the date for that. Have we fixed the date? I'm not sure if we have, but we will send that out very shortly if we haven't already. So thank you very much, everyone, and see you again next time. Thanks.